Well, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good ever what time of day it happens to be that you are listening to the Tattoo Teacher podcast. On this episode, I have Matt Jensen. Now, Matt is an amazing educator. He supports teachers with digital pedagogy. He's an instructional coach, an educational leader, a Kahoot ambassador, and a Queenslander. Well, I mean, that goes a little bit against me because I'm a New South Welshman, and it's getting to that time of the season where the rivalry's starting to come up. So I just had to drop that one in. But Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Phil. It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I'm looking forward to this conversation to hear about all the stuff that you're doing, because I looked through your LinkedIn profile, and there's not enough time to actually have a conversation if I read all the things that you actually do and have done. So I want to actually have you share about some of these things that you're doing and you've done in the past, and why you are where you are now, which leads me to my first question. Well, you're doing all these things. You're, in the EdTech world, you're in digital pedagogy, you're in instructional design, but why schools? We look at how things are moving, and this is a question I ask a lot of my guests, is there could be another profession that you could be doing a lot more. It could be easier, could be an easier clientele, and could be a lot more money, but you've chosen schooling. So why is that?
Yeah, look, I think force of habit, I guess, I guess that's one part of it. Like I've been doing this for I've been working in schools for more than 15 years. So that's just where do you go from here? I guess, I started out wanting to go into schools because I really was passionate about, being a teacher. That was what I really wanted to do. So, after I finished high school, I did I went off and did a marketing degree actually. So my first degree is in marketing and advertising. And I did my marketing and advertising degree. And while I was doing that, I did a drama teaching diploma. So at high school, I was really interested in drama and did lots of dramatic stuff. And so I did this drama teaching diploma while I was doing my business degree. And I was kind of coming to the end of my business degree, and I thought, oh, look, I'm not really sure. Marketing and advertising's cool, but I'm probably going to spend 3 years making cups of coffee for people, and I'm not really sure that that's what I kind of want to do. And so I thought, well, why don't I, take a different tact and have a go at school and see what I think. And I, jumped into it, and I really enjoyed, working in education, working in high schools. I spent, the first 12 or something years of my career in high schools, which I really enjoyed. Found myself very quickly in that kind of ed tech space. So early in my career, my first school when I graduated was in the Rocky Catholic Diocese. And one of the things that we did soon on when I got there is that we had a one-to-one laptop program, which was really crazy for the time. 2011, to have a one-to-one laptop program was really crazy. Certainly I hadn't had that in any of the schools I'd done prac at. There wasn't really any talk at uni about how to use laptops in a one-to-one kind of environment. And so one of the things we did a couple of years into my work there was we transitioned from the kind of really antiquated ed tech stuff that we had to Google Apps for education. And so that was really what got me really ingrained in this ed tech space, and particularly around working with teachers to kind of go, all right, well, we've got these tools now, but how do we make use of them in a meaningful way that's going to make a difference for me and going to make a difference for kids? And so I think that's a thread that has just continued then through the work that I've done. I've transitioned to primary school, and I kind of work more now in primary schools than I do in secondary schools, but the work's still the same. It's about teachers and how do we support teachers to use these kind of cool things that exist.
Yeah, and you've made like a tremendous amount of points there with just some of the things you said. Was one is like, how do we use these tools to best help the teachers and to best help the students? So straight away you've framed this in a way that this is not the solution. The digital technology that's coming in is not the solution. It is an extra thing that we can use, an extra tool that we have to help educate our young
100%. I think it's not a silver bullet, like if, you're a teacher in a classroom and you're feeling burnt out and you're feeling over it, the technology is not going to change that, but it can be really impactful in terms of making the environment better for you and for the teachers and for the students. Sorry, you take something like, we're in this AI world,
Yeah.
crazy bubble or something. And, it's not going to be a silver bullet, but if we as teachers can use it to support our work and use it as a thinking partner and use it to help us to come up with really great lessons and to maybe save a bit of time here and there and sending those emails to parents and some of those kind of things, it can be amazing, but it's not a silver bullet by any means, I don't think.
Yeah, and I'd 100% agree with you there that the technology in and of itself is a great tool, but it's not solving problems, and to a certain extent, it's created more problems than it's solved. But when it's used in a correct way, or in a way that is to benefit our students, it almost helps the students negate the negativity of the device. They start to become critical about what they're seeing and what they're looking at. They're starting to understand how everything works and how they can use that to help them learn to get to their next level of success.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of talk at the moment around the science of learning and how we, best use things like direct instruction. And, I think there's lots of talk about that at the moment in education. But I think equally there needs to be a conversation about how do we impart some of that knowledge to students? How do we make sure that, primary school students, secondary school students understand a level that's appropriate, how their brains work, how learning works, and so that they can have that understanding, they can understand how those things work, and then certainly when you're at the upper end of school and you're kind of thinking about spitting kids out into university and out into the workforce, lifelong learning is a real thing. It's not a furphy, it's not a misnomer. It's a thing that we all have to do in our professional lives.
Yeah.
And so I think if we can make sure that students are well prepared with a nice foundational knowledge of how learning works and what learning looks like, you can ensure that they will be set up for success as these kind of lifelong learners. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be a lifelong learner, you have to understand, like you said, how to learn. And it's not about remembering content. It's not about getting A's, B's, or it's not about necessarily getting to university, which unfortunately is a lot of, I think, again, is one of those. It's an opinion that people see as fact or truth that you have to go to university to be successful, and it's just trying to get the students to understand that no, you don't. Like, and you look at the way, I mean, I know on the Gold Coast, definitely some of the most successful, or what people would deem successful, they have nice cars, they have a nice home, they have plenty of money, they go on the holidays. These are not people most of these guys finished school in year 10. They were rat bags. They probably failed most of their tests, like I did. They went and got trades. They went into the workforce, but they had the foundations of how to learn, even if they didn't understand, like you mentioned the science of learning. Even if they didn't understand that, there was enough embedded into them to go, I want to be successful, so I'm going to put this into practice. And I think that's almost been lost in the recent in the
Yeah, I agree. I think it's about having a toolkit. Like it's about knowing what am I going to do if I get stuck. And I think some of that has been a little bit lost. I think I guess I worry sometimes that we do maybe hold hands a little bit too much, and we
I
kind of
agree.
don't we maybe don't want to let kids fail as much. And I think there's some parental input into that. I think parents are really reluctant to see their kids fail, which, as a parent, I get that. But I think we also need to make sure, or be really conscious that if we never fail, we never develop that toolkit to say, well, what do I do? If things aren't going well, or if I'm presented with a problem that I need to solve out in the real world, how am I going to solve it? What are my toolkits? Can I jump on YouTube? Can I ask ChatGPT? Can I phone a friend? What are my options? That's certainly equally as important as some of those more theoretical things around science of learning and going to university and all those kinds of things. Because you're right, a lot of the most successful people never went to university. They didn't do it.
Yeah, or they started, they got bored, and they realized this is not how it works. That's it. I'm done. I'm out. And I yeah, I find that if we can teach these kids the skills of going, what do I need to do? How do I solve that problem? What do I have within inside of me to give me the strength and the courage to make a decision, right or wrong? I'm going to make the decision. I'm going to go this way, and teach them that. And if anyone, a lot of people would have heard this before because I speak on it quite a bit, is that we need to allow a safe space to fail. We need to allow students in our classrooms to fail, to miss the mark, so that they can go, oh, what do I do? What do I do? And it's just like, well, what do you think you need to do? And get them to start going, you have it inside you, and I'll guide you. And, you talk about the science and learning, and, sometimes there's explicit instructions, and then there's guiding, and then there's, all these things. But a lot of the time it's like, what, you know the answer. I just need to help give you the right questions.
Right. One of the reasons why I love the technologies curriculum, like the technologies Australian curriculum, is so great because it emphasizes the process and not the product. Like if you look at the achievement standard for all those technologies curriculums, the product is one tiny little segment of it. It's all about the ideation, the design thinking, the kind of supported failure to go, all right, well, I tried this, it didn't work. How am I going to problem solve that? If it's digital technologies, how am I going to debug it? But if it's design technologies, how am I going to change the design? And, as teachers, we're there to support that. But that's one of the things I really like about that curriculum is that it has such an emphasis on the process.
Yeah, and the process is the critical thing. Now, I've been teaching design and technology since, this is going to age me. Well, not really, because I came into teaching late, but I've been teaching design and technology since 2002. And, there's been many iterations in curriculum, but with a lot of the people that I've worked with, the whole thing is the end product. That's not the important part at all. It's how you get to the end product. You tell me, because all the learning is in the doing to get there, right or wrong. And your job might be a complete mess and whatever it is. And I explain to the kids, like, it doesn't matter about this. That's the smallest part. Show me the process. And they're like, but I want to make something. It's like, we will, but it's about you'll make something better if you follow the process well.
That's right. Absolutely. You've got to follow the process. You've got to demonstrate your thinking, which I think in this AI world that we are moving into, which is really about thinking, and about how can AI support you in thinking, and how does thinking support me? That design process is a really nice scaffold for that. And so I think it's fantastic that we can help students to kind of learn some of those meta skills.
Yeah, and it brings that thinking into, and we can like we were talking about teaching them the skills of learning. We can teach them to bring design thinking. And as a digital tech and a design tech teacher, we've been doing this before. Really, it was called design thinking, but we teach them how to bring in the empathy, the evaluation, the ideation, and then they can start to go, hold on, I can actually bring those things into my other subjects, and I can learn and I can learn to ask the right questions. And I had a guest on just recently, Chris Barnes, who he's right in the middle of building this transdisciplinary education, which he's loving at a school over in New Jersey. And he goes, as soon as the kids sort of get it, he goes, like their eyes, like they just light up, because all of a sudden they're going, I can use my technology in math, and I can use my math in English, and I can use my English and all of a sudden they are actually doing far better at the science of learning than we could ever actually try and explain to them.
Yeah, 100%. 1,000%. I think, there's such benefit in integrating those things. It's, a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I made this change from high school, where I'd been for my whole career, into primary. And one of the things I love about primary schools and about primary school teachers is that there's so much scope to integrate things. Way more than in high school. In high school, you sort of feel like moving mountains to try and integrate things, or, even just to try and have fewer teachers in year 7 and some of those things. Like it's we try, but it's so difficult. Whereas in a primary school, you can do all of those things. The students and the teachers have those relationships that allows them to talk about how the skills from different disciplines can be integrated together. So, that's been one of the big joys for me about working in primary schools is the options that exist to do that kind of integrating that's so powerful.
Yeah, that's. I mean, many times people have said, "Why don't you go into?" For me, primary school. I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm not. I can't do that at the moment. They're little people, and they've got, you know." And look, but the way you're explaining it, it's like, well, maybe who knows? Maybe I could start to, you know, dip the toe in. I don't want to let my boss hear that because she'll be all over it.
Right,
But
exactly.
But the scope of digital technology over the years, over the 15 years that you've been doing this, and then the transition from high school to primary school, what are the biggest changes within, firstly, technology that you've seen but sort of in ed tech?
Yeah, look, I think so much has happened. And, I've been through different iterations of things. And, I've been kind of in the Microsoft world for the last, sort of 7 or 8 years. And so, that has shifted a lot, but I guess in some ways it's about the power of the devices at the core, it's about those early devices that I had in 2011. They were pretty crappy devices. Really, they couldn't really do very much, and we didn't really have much scope to be able to do too much with them. But now the devices that the students have got are so capable. We made the decision a couple of years ago at the primary school I work at to just transition to iPads right across the primary school. So everyone now from prep to year six in some form or another has an iPad they have access to. They're amazing devices for being creative and being able to make videos and make animations. And so there's all those kind of things. I think one big shift that has happened as well is for teachers around the kind of changes and strengthening around what we understand as kind of privacy and what things we should and shouldn't do. In those early days, I would just, kind of get the kids to sign up to whatever tool took my fancy. We in the early days, I did this year 8 course, which was like a multimedia course, and so the kids signed into Prezi and they signed into all these far fetched kind of multimedia tools that I found, and now there's no way that we would be able to do some of those kind of things, but there's that's been a big shift as well, I think, in terms of that space and just the explosion of opportunities. One of the things I'm thinking about at the moment, and I'm presenting at the Adolescent Success Conference in or something on this idea of a digital core and kind of trying to look at how we can reduce the number of tools that we give teachers access to, just to make sure that the quality that students get is high quality because they don't have access to as many tools, but also to make sure that there's it supports teachers to not be overwhelmed by so many different things, but kind of how do we narrow that down and make it so it isn't too overwhelming.
Yeah, and that's a massive point, isn't it? Because there's so much thrown at teachers. Do this. Here's a shiny thing. Here's another shiny thing. This will change your classroom. This will make your lesson plans easier. This will do this. This will do that. And you're just bombarded, and you can see why there's so much technology fatigue. Um, that the teachers are just going, enough. No, forget it. Just give me a pen and paper. Like, forget the computer. I don't want that anymore. I want to be able to do these things, which it definitely has as a point and has a place. There's so much time. There's a lot of times, put it on the pen before you even get to turn your device on. Like, it's got to go onto paper first, and because the kids default straight to a device. And you're just trying to wean them off that to go, no, just think and do. I can't draw. Yeah, you can. And one of the biggest things I say to the kids, and it sort of see their brains just like working overtime because they tell me, oh, I can't draw, and I say, can you write your name? Yeah. I said, well, you can draw then. And they go, what do you mean? I said, well, you know how to put straight lines and curves together to communicate. That's all drawing an object is. You just put in the straight lines and the curves together, and then all of a sudden they're like, "It's that simple." Yeah, it's that simple.
It doesn't have to be amazing.
No.
It doesn't have to be, doesn't, there's a scope of drawing, right from kind of stick objects to these amazing artworks. But, I'm not asking you for an amazing artwork. I'm asking you for something that communicates some meaning, and that I can kind of see and you can work on and you can iterate. Exactly. But yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for reducing the number of tools that we have access to, and making sure that we go deep in terms of understanding them and how we can best use them to support students, rather than having a plethora of options available, and nothing gets used well. The students use something different, particularly in secondary schools, when you're moving between, 5 or 6 classes in a day, and every teacher's using some different kind of tool, and you're trying to navigate that. That's really challenging as well. So I think there's something to be said for that. And, obviously making sure that, students are putting pen to paper and doing that first, before anything else is really important.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Now, with your transition down, like I mean, the high school kids, they sort of, you know, they're pretty. Most of them pretty good though. They can follow the instructions pretty well, and they can, a lot of the systems are pretty intuitive. But how do you go with the younger years? Because I mean, there's that terrible term of digital native, which yes, they grew up with a screen in their hand, but they've never learnt how to use it, and they can pick up and they can start scrolling and they can find different things and they can do all that sort of stuff. But as far as actually using the tools that they need to, how do you find that down in the younger years? Like as a high school teacher, I'm just like, man, how would I explain to a 5-year-old how to do what I want them to do?
Yeah. Look, I think it's like anything. You need to be really explicit about what it is that you want the students to do. Like I had a pretty big learning curve, so I went from I think in my last year in the high school, I had, I think, only year 10, 11, and 12 students, and I then suddenly turned up at the beginning of the next year and I had year 2 to 6. So it was a real big learning curve for me. And the little guys had iPads, and the 4s, 5s, and 6s had laptops, and they had no idea how to use their laptops. I think the first time we logged in with the year 4s or the year 5s, it took us the hour to just get everyone logged in, because, what's my password? And, this isn't working. And, my password's been written down, but, it's blue, but it's looks like a V, and so I've been writing BLVE. So I think what I learned is that you have to take things really slowly. You need to be very explicit. One of the reasons why we have shifted to iPad right across the primary school where I am, is because there are some tools on iPad that allow you to manage things a little bit more effectively. So Apple Classroom allows you to kind of have a bit more of a capability to monitor what students are doing, to kind of stop them, lock them into things, kind of block their iPads, and everyone comes back to me. So I think that was one of the things that I learned early on in that process is, right, well, how do I use some of the tools that I've got? How can I use Apple Classroom? And then how can I use those tools along with expectations? So, one of the things that I will do is, if I want everyone to have their eyes on me, I'll say eyes on me, and I'll do a countdown to 3. And if everyone's not looking at me, then the iPads get locked. Well, you guys know what the expectation is. You know that I say eyes on me and I count down from 3. If you're all looking at me, I won't lock your iPads. So it's about, using the two things together. So using the tool, but also having those really clear and, I guess, kind of static routines and expectations that don't change. There aren't too many of them that it gets overwhelming, to support the use of the tool and to, yeah, help you because it is tricky, particularly like you're saying with these digital natives, so-called, who can't ever find a file because they have no idea how to do file management, which, it really isn't complicated, but on an iPad, you don't have to worry about file management really when you're just using it to play games and stuff. So, it's a tricky space to be in.
Yeah, and because that's one of the things that, I mean, I think for so many years, like year seven, the kids come into design technology, and my first couple of lessons have been teaching them about file management because I want them to, you know, do some drawings, scan them, put them into their design tech. Where's your file? Oh, no, I just save it in the oh, it's on the desktop. Yeah, but what happens if your computer crashes? Oh, yeah. Oh, no, it's fine. It'll be on the desktop. No, well, and so all of a sudden it's like, okay, let's go in here and create a new folder, call it English, create a new folder, call it, and I build this file structure for them, and it's almost default that it falls on the design technology department. In digital technology, often that doesn't happen. Well, in a lot of schools, doesn't happen until year 8 or 9 at least. So it's like, oh, I've got to do all this sort of stuff, and that's where you really see that these kids know how to use a computer. They know how to navigate through. They will follow an instruction, but as far as actually understanding what it is as a tool, yeah, that takes a fair bit of time in the classroom to get them to fully understand that.
It does. Like even troubleshooting, like how do I troubleshoot my device? What have I done before I, put my hand up to the teacher or before I, turn up to the IT staff in a high school? What have I done to try and fix it? Have you turned it on and off again? Have you done any of these kind of things? Kids are oftentimes they're pretty clueless about how to actually troubleshoot or, yeah, do those simple basic things which are actually important, like file structures and that stuff.
Yeah, even how to just restart the computer, not just close it,
Mhm.
but or just like with an iPad, just hit the home key and it goes blank. But actually, how to restart a computer? Like it's for you and I, it's a basic thing. It's like something goes wrong, and we know there's an error. We've done everything in the chain to get there, but it's like, you know what? I've just got to restart this thing because it's stuck in a loop somewhere, and we know how to
Yeah.
do it because that's
Mm.
just that we came up from. Well, I mean, I know I did from like a DOS prompt system. It's like you've got to go back to the basics, and yeah, it's a challenge, isn't it?
It is. It's, yeah. It's tricky, and I think it oftentimes it's because we don't understand why we need to do that. Like I'll tell kids, the whole shutting down your computer thing is it's about memory. And so, the reason why we sleep at night is because it allows our brains to reset for the next day. If you didn't sleep for a week, you wouldn't function very well. If you don't shut your computer down properly for a week, it's full and its brain's full and it can't think. So, you actually shutting down your computer and turning it off and leaving it off overnight and turning it on tomorrow is the equivalent of yourself actually having a sleep overnight. And they kind of go, oh, okay, well, that sort of makes sense. But if we don't have these mental models, then it's really tricky.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, speaking of tricky and challenges, how have you found? Because I know you go to a PD and there's you're trying to teach teachers. That's always the biggest challenge. But how do you go on a day-to-day basis? Like, have you found it more challenging to try and have the teachers adopt new tools, new processes, new ways of thinking? Have you found that harder than getting the students to do it?
Look, I think in some ways it is tricky. There's that kind of bell curve of adoption, and so you're always going to have those few teachers who are really keen to try new things and who've already heard of it and who are kind of chomping at the bit. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you're going to have those teachers who just say, "Oh no, it isn't for me. I don't feel comfortable. I don't want to do it." I think PD, particularly in the tech space, it can be really tricky, um, particularly because if that's the space that you work in, like if your role in a school is someone who sort of tries to push this cart of digital pedagogy, maybe you get a staff meeting a term, or 10 minutes in a staff meeting a term to kind of show people something. And so I think there's a real challenge there, in that if that's all you're getting is you're just getting some exposure to a new tool, just kind of exciting those 5 or 10 people really isn't enough. I think you need to be making sure that you are providing opportunities for teachers to understand why a particular tool is really valuable. I think you need to provide structured opportunities for people to see what they can do with a tool. But I think it's also really important. There's this rehearsal piece that is increasingly being talked about, especially in kind of coaching circles, instructional coaching circles, that teachers really need to be able to have an opportunity to rehearse new skills before they enact them in the classroom.
Absolutely.
One of the things I did a couple of years ago when I was back in working in the high school is, obviously COVID was massive, and we all started using Microsoft Teams during COVID. And so, there was a hangover from that. A lot of teachers were still using Teams as a kind of a, default LMS, learning management system type
Yeah.
type product for their classes, but they probably weren't making the most of it. There's a whole lot of new things that exist in there and better ways to do stuff. And so I got 15 minutes in a staff meeting. But what I did was I put a bit of time into making this resource, which was sort of like a UDL, like Universal Design for Learning. I called it a learning menu.
Yep.
Put together some little videos in this menu. But there was a focus on the first thing you need to do as part of working through this menu is you need to go in and you need to make yourself a demo team so that you've got a space that you can actually play around and work through some of the activities to play and see what it looks like and see what the student perspective is. I encourage people to make a demo team, one between two, so that someone could be the student and someone could be the teacher, and then you could actually look and see what it looked like from a student perspective. I think that rehearsal piece is really, really important. And in so much of the PD around anything that gets delivered, I think we miss those opportunities for teachers to have that space to rehearse away from the classroom. And the evidence really is that if we don't give teachers that opportunity, then they really don't faithfully implement things when they get back to the classroom. Nothing really changes, their habits don't shift. So yeah, I think that's a powerful thing.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. And it's funny you put it in rehearsing and doing it that way, and it's almost your drama teacher coming through or
Yeah.
your drama training. It's like, hey, we have rehearsals so we can make the mistakes and we can work out where our choke
Hmm.
points are, or what needs to be tweaked, or what needs to be removed, or whatever it might be. And over the years, you mentioned all the online learning and getting stuff done. It's just thrown on us through the COVID pandemic there. But what I've done, and one of the things I was trained to do as well, is in practical projects, make the project at least once before you teach it to the students, because you're going to find out where things go wrong, or you're going to make a mistake, and then you're going to have to work out how to roll it back and do all those things. And I know when I make online tutorials for my students with, especially for CAD stuff, I'll do the drawing. I'll go through the whole drawing, for a 5-minute video. It might take me 2 hours because I've drawn it 10 times to make sure that I click on the right spots. I know exactly where the tool is. I'm using the right language so that that tool that I'm giving the students is the most effective tool that I can give them.
That's right. Absolutely. Like I've been making some little videos for LinkedIn around some of the AI stuff that's available in Kahoot. And the videos take ages to make because you have to kind of work through it. You have to make sure that you understand the basis of the product really well so that you don't make those kind of mistakes. And yeah, I've done the same thing with making tutorials for different pieces of software for, no, probably not, I probably take it not so seriously with if it's something for teachers, because I think it's okay to let them kind of see you fail. But certainly with students, it's really important that you're not wasting their time. They don't have much of an attention span, so you don't want to waste an extra 10 or 15 seconds fixing a mistake because they'll tune out. So yeah, that's a really good way of thinking about that rehearsal space, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just one of those things that I was just taught. Like, you will do this first. You're doing this project. You're going to make it. That's your PD, and we do all those things. And yeah, it's one of those things that it's where, and you mentioned AI, and you've now mentioned Kahoot, and you sort of beat me to the punch there. And so you're a Kahoot ambassador, and now a lot of I've not used it very much, and probably not nearly to the capacity that it has in its arsenal. But I've seen most teachers, they use it as almost a fill-in novelty thing, and like the kids love it, but then
Mm.
they're not sort of going, well, how do we? Well, what point is this? Oh, this is just fun. Let's do a Kahoot type of thing. But how is Kahoot, or what's explain about Kahoot what it is? Because some people, I mean, some people may not even know what it is. But so explain a little bit about it, and then your involvement within that group, and what an ambassador actually does.
Yeah. So, I mean, essentially, I guess it started out its life as a quiz platform. The students sign in on their devices and you run through it and you do a quiz essentially. And so the students get points, and at the end, there's a winner. And so I guess, in that way, it has pretty kind of behaviorist foundations. There's right and wrong answers, those kind of things. But I think the gamification aspect of it, the points and the celebrations and some of those kind of things is why students really like it. I've been using it for probably 10 years, I guess. And so it's changed a lot through that time. And so a couple there, they had employed a director of pedagogy, like Kahoot, which is a European company, had employed this director of pedagogy, and one of her jobs was to really look at how can we make sure that Kahoot supports really good pedagogy. And so some of the things that they've done over the time is that they've really built the ability for you to be able to do different things. So, things can be supported by those quiz kind of type questions, but there's lots of other options as well. So, you can kind of have slides in it. You can have quiz questions. There's now much more of an emphasis on sort of open-ended questions. One of the things I really love is there's some brainstorming functionality built into it. So, I've used this with students, like developing team names and that kind of thing. Like if you need to come up with a team name for something, you have a brainstorming question, and everyone puts in their ideas for the team names. And then the next stage is they sort of get to vote on what they want. And then the top few come out. But likewise, if you're brainstorming something for a, design tech project, you can do a similar sort of thing in there. So there's lots of options in terms of using it to support in different ways. There's also these days lots of kind of AI stuff built in there as well. So obviously there's always been lots of kind of pre-made Kahoots that other people have made that you can access. What you have the opportunity to do now with some of the AI tools is to actually quickly make something that meets your exact purpose. So, I've stepped away from full-time teaching, and so I do a bit of relief work now, in addition to some part-time stuff I do in my school that I still work at. And so, you'll turn up and there'll be, you'll be doing a lesson on something, and I'll just, get the Kahoot AI to come up with a quick Kahoot for me based on that specific thing that the students are doing, and we can use it as a bit of review. So there's lots of opportunities to do that. In terms of me as an ambassador, I've been able to do some cool things with them. Like I said, Louisa, who was the head of pedagogy, I was involved in a project where we piloted, they came up with this idea that they would get teachers to kind of create content, sort of premium content.
Okay.
So I was involved in a project pilot where we did some of that work. Last year, they actually started an Australian team. So Kahoot never had a team based in Australia. And last year, they they invested in a local team, and so they sort of launched that at EdTech in Sydney, and so I was able to go to EdTech in Sydney last year and kind of work with that team, which was really good, and got to work. A couple of years ago, they purchased an AI platform, and the guy they purchased the AI platform from, he actually lives in Sydney, and so he came along to EduTech, and we were able to kind of quiz him about some of the AI stuff that he was doing and what was coming, and so yeah, it gives you that opportunity to have a bit of a inside scoop, I guess, as to some of those things that are coming down the pike as well.
Yeah, AI is it's almost it's a polarizing word these days, isn't it? That it's loved or it's hated. It's so, and also with the student body as well, because some of them, because of everything they hear, some of them are afraid to use it because they go, I don't want to cheat, like I want to do my own work, and but I've been told it's all of this, and so there's all these things floating around in the ether. But what what are your over, I guess, broad stroke view on how it's gonna change education?
Yeah, look, I think it's tricky. I saw someone put into one of those teacher Facebook groups the other day her concerns, and so she's saying they've been given access to Copilot, and so she's using it to kind of write parent emails and come up with lesson ideas, and she's quite enjoying it. But some of her colleagues, giving it student assignments, and asking to give them feedback, and then basically just printing out that feedback and giving it back to the students, and then kind of giving them grades to go in the mark book. I didn't comment it, but what I thought is that my question to those teachers would be, okay, so if that's what you're doing, then clearly you would be happy for the students to just put the assignment into the AI and get it to produce the assignment and turn that in, and it's just a kind of a recursive loop, which I don't think is helpful for anybody. I think in terms of the way that I'm using it, and the way I think that it is most effectively able to be used, really is as a kind of thinking and brainstorming partner. I think teaching is or can be a kind of a profoundly lonely place. You're in this room with these kids, but it can be quite lonely. The staff room's quite often far away. You don't get much of an opportunity, maybe even to sit down and have lunch. And so I think increasingly it's becoming lonely. You don't have maybe someone, if you're the only person in your school who teaches your subject area, you don't have anyone to kick ideas around with maybe. And so AI can be that thinking partner. It can be the person that you go to say, look, I'm working on this assignment and I'm struggling. Can you give me some ideas? Can you give me ideas as to what that might look like in practice? I think the opportunities for it to save you lots of time in little ways are really powerful as well. Even with students. So if you need to produce an exemplar for something, but you don't have the hours and hours to kind of painstakingly produce some piece of written work, you can use AI as that thinking partner, do that thinking in the background and say, right, can you now produce me based upon that? Can you produce me a draft of this, and kind of work with it to produce something that might be effective? So in terms of your question, which was how does it impact education? I think it will impact education pretty profoundly. I think we have to be careful as teachers about the way that we're using it, and be really conscious of who's in control of it as well.
Yeah.
Most of the AI tools are being produced by these big multinational data hungry firms. And so I think we have to be really aware of that, aware of how we're using it, making sure that we are using it in a way that supports us and our students, and not in a way that just takes away from the really authentic experience of schooling, I guess.
Yeah, there's so many things that could go really wrong, but and on the same coin, there's so many things that could go right. And depending on who you are and who the student is, it's a flip of that coin. I mean, we're always gonna have students and teachers who will want to find the easiest, quickest way to do something just because it's the easiest and quickest to circumvent a whole range of things. But we've talked a lot about, it's time saving. You've talked a lot about that, and I've talked about it in the past as well with other guests, that the time saving thing, and everyone goes, oh yeah, we're saving this many hours a week or whatever it might be. But what a lot of people don't actually hear is that all that time saved by helping us write emails, to be sounding boards, to tidy up writing, to change a bit of a novel to help a student understand it in a better way. All that stuff, yes, it saves us a tremendous amount of time, but so many teachers go, yes, I've got that time back now. I can pour it back into my classroom. I can pour it back into the relationship, so I can actually meet these kids where they're at. So then I can actually help teach them better, and then they can learn better, and they can become more successful in whatever avenue that they want to go into. So, and it is a thinking tool. I really believe that I use it, on a daily basis, and I use it to help me with my podcast. I help it clarify some of the things that I'm thinking, like, how does this sound? Does this make sense to you? Oh, I've had this guest and we've discussed all these things. Can you help me? Yeah, these are the points. And so I'm using it, and I use it for parent emails, and I use it for all those things, because I don't write a good email. So I help. We use Copilot, and the school provides it, so it's the enterprise platform, which again, that has a lot more guardrails in it than if I was just to use a subscription on, maybe like ChatGPT or Gemini or one of the other myriad of platforms that are available. But put in the information that I want in this email. I tell it the tone. I tell it, all the points, and then it gives me something, and I go, yeah, no, that's okay. Can you try again? I want to highlight this thing, highlight that thing. It sends it back, and then I get it, and then I edit it again anyway. But I've gone through this process that hasn't annoyed any other staff members, and I've been able to do it, and then I've got now a tool, a resource, a skill that I've learned that I can then give to a student, or I can give to one of my colleagues to help them go, here's a little bit more time that you can save. Here's a little bit less load that's going to drain you today.
That's right. And then you can use that, to look at the design of your assessment to make it, more AI proof. I don't like that, but that's where we are. What can I do? How can I build on relationships? How can I use the bit of time I get back to give better feedback or whatever? So yeah, I think anything that allows teachers to have a bit more time in their day is really powerful.
Yeah, because we don't waste, like, teachers don't waste time. They're time poor a lot of the time, because there are so many demands on us. And if we could just reduce those demands even by 10%, like, that would make such a difference in so many teachers' lives. One big concern I do have, though, is, look, I've been teaching for 25 years now, 24, 25 years. So I know my content. I know what I need to teach these kids. One thing I am concerned about, and look, I think the platforms are getting better, but when I ask it to produce, or to help me produce a program, I know what's right and what's wrong when it comes back to me. So my concern is, like, how do we help the new teachers, or the early start teachers coming through, to go, hey, really, don't just take this at face value. Is there anything that we can do to help them understand, so that they can learn their craft and their content and be the best that they can be for their students?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really valid point. I think it's really tricky when we don't know what we don't know, and so or maybe we don't have enough time as a beginning teacher to really interrogate the output of the AI, and so we just go with the plan that it gives us, and it falls on its head because it isn't actually very good, and the students say, well, hang on a minute, why are we doing this? This isn't, we're supposed to be doing algebra, and this is some other kind of thing.
I've seen
I
that.
guess it, yeah, well, I mean, this is what happens. And it does. Particularly if we don't use good inputs to the tools, the outputs aren't very good. And so I think one of the most powerful things that I have found in the work that I've done just with using the AI for different things that I've used it for. So, I obviously use it for work, and I'm, trying to finish my master's. And so I'm using it a bit for my uni stuff as well. And what I am finding increasingly is that really thinking about it as a thinking partner and going through and working through that thinking process at the outset, and then saying, all right, well, I'm really happy with the way that we've constructed this. Now, can you go away and do some drafting for me? That seems to produce better results. And so I think for those beginning teachers, they would need to make sure, and we need to make sure that they are empowered with the skills to do some of that pre-work,
Yeah.
to make sure that they aren't giving really poor inputs and then expecting the quality of the output to be high, because it won't be. Which I guess that highlights a whole lot of things. It highlights the need for really effective mentoring of early career teachers by people who understand how to get the most out of the tools as well. You can have really great veteran teachers who make really great mentors, but how much do they understand maybe of the best way to get the best output out of the tools? So
Yeah, it's it's an exciting time, but it's also almost a nerve-wracking time. But what I am seeing, and what I think is a real positive. I mean, maybe I'm just in an echo chamber, I don't know, but a lot of the stuff is the questions about, like, these questions are being asked. These, like, is this a good thing? Are we using it right? Should students be using it? We know they are, but how do we teach them how to use it in a safe, responsible, ethical, um, with integrity? Because it's here, and it's not going away. So it's like, here's a tool. How do we use it? It's like I go into a workshop, or you go into a classroom with your iPads. Here's the tool, and they could use it either the right way or the wrong way. And it's our job as educators to do the best that we can to show them the best way, and to use these tools with integrity.
that's right. And I think a lot of schools, and there's a lot of thinkers out there, who are working in this space and trying to help teachers and schools to do that work. But I think it's tricky work to do when you've got a whole lot of other things going on in schools. I think it can be another thing, which, before you mentioned, look, let's just get back to pen and paper. And so I think, we need to be careful that we are doing the work, but making sure that we aren't overwhelming people at the same time. And I know there are lots of people out there, especially on LinkedIn, doing a lot of that work to support teachers. I know there's, a lot of work around assessment and, what AI might look like. And there's kind of tables, and there's things that schools can take in order to support them to make their own policies and ways of working around it. So I think that's good.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it's a conversation that could go on and on and on. And I think, we could talk, I think, technology and all this for probably, I'd say at least another hour. I reckon we got in a spot.
Absolutely.
But the great thing is, it's an ongoing conversation that so many of us are having, and I think so many schools are having. And I think the blinkers for many schools are coming off and going, okay, it's here. We might have jumped on board really quickly, but how do we now, how do we use it? Or others who have gone, no, I'm not using it, but they're starting to just peel back those things and just having a dip in their, messing up analogies here, but they're dipping their toes. They're dipping their toes in the water of, okay, well, let's just try, let's just see, and let's have the conversations with the students. And I think that's the critical thing, that we talk to our students about it.
100%, 100%. I think, yeah, there's a lot of teachers who are just dipping their toes in. I think, that's a great way to do it. Dip your toes in, have a conversation with it, particularly if you've got access to something like Copilot in that sort of enterprise world where you've got that bit more flexibility to, maybe give it some student data and help you to analyze that. Or, there's a whole lot of things you can do that are really just dipping your toes in and seeing what it can do for you, which is cool.
Absolutely. Well, Matt, it is a school night for both of us. And I want to respect your time, and I thank you for your time that you've given us. But just a few last little things that I want to ask you is, if you had a challenge for people who are listening, what would it be? Like, it doesn't, it could be within the classroom, could be with outside the classroom, it could be a personal challenge. But what would you like to just put out there for people who are listening?
Yeah, look, I think, if there's something that you're passionate about, is there, if there's, a teaching practice that you're enacting, something that you're really interested in learning more about, if there's a technology tool that you're using, have a conversation with someone in your school about it. Go to your line manager, have a conversation, talk about maybe how you can share at a staff meeting, or, how you can help other people to showcase it, to use the thing that you're really passionate about. I think all too often, like I was talking about before, I think teaching's sometimes is a bit of a lonely place, and we don't share enough within our network. So I think about how you can do that. Think about how you can have a conversation. Think about how you can post something on LinkedIn. Think about how you can share the really great things that you're doing and the things that are interesting to you for your own professional growth.
Yeah, absolutely. That's perfect. That's perfect. Now, we connected through LinkedIn, like so many of my guests. But if people wanted to connect with you, find out more about Kahoot, more about some of the stuff that you're doing, what would be the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, so obviously LinkedIn, I've got a website. So my website is mattjensenedu.com, and that's got kind of links to my LinkedIn and links to some Kahoot, my sort of Kahoot profile, and a link to my email and those kind of things. So that's probably a great place to start if people want to reach out and get in touch.
I'll stick that in the show notes for people who are listening and people who want to contact with you.
Awesome. Thank you.
And yeah, and but lastly, and look, it wouldn't be the Tattoo Teacher podcast if I didn't actually ask you, Matt, do you have any tattoos?
I've been waiting for this one. I said to my wife, "Oh," and then he asks at the end, and my answer is no, and I'm a little bit too scared, I think. Although my barber, who I go to, I'm in Ipswich, and so I go to a barber in the CBD of Ipswich here in Queensland, and he actually has a tattoo shop next door that he owns, and he mentioned to me that he might actually be moving the barber shop into the front of the tattoo shop. So who knows? It might just be he might be cutting my hair, and there might be a sneaky tattoo. Who knows what could happen? But I still think I'm too much of a scaredy cat, Phil.
Look, it is a big decision, and if you don't like needles, I'd stay away from it. But yeah, it's one of those things. Hey, but you never know. You got a barber who's a tattooist, and look, and you're in Ipswich, so you just never know what might happen.
You just do never know what might happen any day.
Absolutely. Well, again, Matt, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the richness of this conversation. I look forward to staying in contact and seeing all the stuff that you continue to do, and just the stuff that you continue to share with other educators like myself.
Thanks very much, Phil. It's been lots of fun to have a conversation, and yeah, hopefully we've brought some people some joy and kind of maybe imparted some little thing that they can use to make their lives a little bit easier.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Matt, thanks again. You have a wonderful evening, and we'll talk again soon.
You too. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you so much for listening to the Tattoo Teacher podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it insightful. If you like what you heard, it would mean so much to me if you could either like, follow, and subscribe to whatever platform you are listening on. The music was by DJ Fruit Salad. Thanks again for listening. Stay cool. Be blessed.